Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, which is on how to simplify complex content. One of the things you might notice today is the sound might not be brilliant quality, which is partly due to the fact that I am mobile today and in a very different location. So hopefully it's still okay for you guys. Today's webinar isn't like our usual really long hour-long session. It's a lot quicker, and that's because there are really only two things that we're covering off because it's a very focused, simple topic on simplification. So in today's webinar, I'm going to walk through some reasons why you would simplify complex content and what that actually means. And in the second part of the webinar, I'm going to give you a specific framework that shows you how to do exactly this. So before we get into it, a bit about me. I am Letitia Mooney. I am the CEO of Brutal Pixie. We're a content strategy and communications agency based in Adelaide, Australia. We are in this business because we, and me specifically, believe that great relationships start with good communication. This means that you have clear, empathic, human business that actually cares. It cares about its people, it cares about its clientele. It works in a way to demonstrate that care because it's part of the fabric of who they are. That's why we're in it. That's what we believe really drives beautiful business and great delivery, and is what creates longevity in business too. What we do, we focus on communication in complex industries like law, engineering and health. So simplification is one of those things that we are really, really big on, largely because of the areas in which we work. So what we do is a bit of communications, a bit of PR if necessary, and distribution, content marketing stuff for people. We do a lot of content creation and content editorial. So we also provide editorial services to simplify and improve other people's work. And we also do commercial writing for regular output, blogs, etc. Client communication sequences and mapping that experience and what that's exactly like, and content strategy work, which includes content first design for websites, which is where we get the understandability right before we think about how it looks, because ultimately you can have the prettiest website in the world, but if it doesn't work for people, it's a waste of time. So that's a bit about who we are. We are Aussie-born and global by nature, so we've worked with people in all kinds of places. Now, the important thing today is about why you would simplify things. There are two elements to the simplification. One is a set of reasoning for end users, and one is a set of reasoning for you as the producer, as opposed to the person using it. In general, simplification enables people to comprehend more quickly what you are presenting to them, no matter how you present that. It therefore enables people to achieve their goals more quickly. So if you are selling, I don't know, let's say, for example, water pipe integrity testing services, then, and the person at the other end is in procurement and is not an engineer, then talking a lot about the technicalities of, your technology may not be as useful to them, particularly if it is very, very complex. What they want to know is what you offer, does it match their brief, is it the right price, and how do we get more information from you? It enables them to achieve their goal faster, which is to procure a service. Pardon me. Simplification enables people to scan read. The majority of people on the internet especially don't read. They don't read word for word. They do not read everything that you write. What they do is engage in scanning reading, which means that they will go into a page and they will start at the top and they will scan through really quickly. What they're looking for are the keywords that are in their mind, that answers a question, perhaps, most of the time it's a question, that they are trying to answer. The way that you approach your content creation and approach your simplification enables them to do this much more quickly, which is why it makes information accessible. Simplification enables scanning reading so that people can get access to the information more quickly. But in terms of accessibility, it also allows you to reach a much broader audience, because simplification, while it sounds like something like dumbing down, it's not dumbing down. It removes barriers to understanding, and that's a key factor in this kind of work. Removing barriers to understanding allows you to be an audience advocate for your work, for your business, for your clients, and it allows people of all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of abilities to access your information. I say all kinds of abilities because it also includes people who, for example, may have ADHD and can't pay attention for long periods of time or any periods of time. They may have other cognitive disabilities, which may include memory problems. They may have all sorts of, they may have dyslexia. They may have not be able to see very well. They may, there's all sorts of kinds of things, including autism, for example, may relate to things very differently. So simplification enables you to give access to the most amount of people possible. It's not about dumbing down. And I think that distinction is quite important, because otherwise you will feel like you're just dumbing things down because people don't understand you, which then shifts you out of your connective mindset and into one that is quite arrogant and nasty, frankly. But accessibility opens your work up to everybody. And the result of that is it makes the entire process for the end user much easier, because there are no more barriers for them. It feels like a buttery experience. It's smooth, you get into it, it's like just spreads on, Buttery experiences are the kinds of experiences we're after. For you, simplifying things also has a number of benefits. The first of them is that your material becomes clearer, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you've ever been in a situation where someone in your organisation has created material that then was difficult for other people to understand, you know exactly what this problem can throw at you. Your material is clearer, which means that over time it has a longer lifetime. Your material is easier to identify because you know from the first paragraph exactly what it's about, or the headings are very clear, or there's something about it that identifies it instantly. That's also important if you're scanning through files and looking at previews, for example. You want to know exactly what it is, and it forces you to become clearer in what you communicate to other people, which is, of course, the greatest benefit of them all. As Einstein said, the definition of genius is taking the complex and making it simple. And having worked with a lot of very beautiful, highly intelligent people who cannot write in complex ways cannot write in simple ways about their very complex things, some days I do agree with Einstein. But truly, if you can explain it to a 9-year-old in a way a 9-year-old will understand, then you are on a winning streak. So let's look at the framework. This simplicity framework is a hierarchical method for simplifying your writing. It's a framework that we have developed here at Brittle Pixie. We developed the framework in collaboration with a team of engineers at the University of Adelaide, and I give them due credit because they asked for the simplification to be in a step-by-step framework, and why not? So what I did was develop our original training around the 10 steps to simplicity as a framework so that it can be printed out and put on a wall and used in a step-by-step kind of manner. And I'm just going to change the size of this because it's not terribly clear in the stream. There we go, that's a bit clearer. There you go, you can see that a bit better. If you want a copy of this after the webinar, let me know and I will send you a copy of that framework. And today I'm going to take you through all of it so that you understand it. We're going to work through the framework top to bottom so that you can see how you can put this into practice in a functional way. The important thing to know about the framework is that it is sequential. You have to follow each step in order, otherwise you are not going to get to a simplified place as easily as you could be. So that's something that you need to be aware of. There are 10 steps to simplicity, and they're all here. I'm going to read them out to you. 1, reduce. 2, organise. 3, time. Give people their time back. 4, learn. When you learn about something, it's not as difficult anymore. Difference and variety means that if you see the same thing in the same way all the time, it becomes very boring. Boredom is a form of complexity because it introduces a barrier. 6 is context, because the context of use introduces complexity. This even applies to simple works being read on a train that is noisy and busy because there are so many more distractions. Those distractions introduce complexity into the work, which means that if you know how, where, and when your audience will be using something, you will be able to introduce greater simplicity into the work for them. The 7th is emotion, because when we inspire good emotions, people feel good. When they feel good, things aren't as difficult anymore. Same with trust. And number 9 is interesting because it asks us to accept that sometimes simplification can't happen and that we have to accept failure. And number 10 is the one rule, or the rule that you can apply when you can't remember any of the others. And if you only remember one, this is the one to remember from today. Subtract the obvious, add the meaningful. Now, all of these laws, the simplicity laws, are not mine, and I have to give due credit. They come from a book called The 10 Laws of Simplicity, and I have to warn you, it's not a terribly simple book to read, ironically, but if you're interested in reading this in more detail, that's where you can find them. So, let's begin. We're going to walk through this from top to bottom, and I'm going to explain how to apply each of these things so that you can then go and use the framework yourself. Meta is the first level. The meta section is the big picture. It thinks about where it appears, what you want to convey, and what you want to do. Oh, excuse me. The meta, hopefully we are still streaming okay. I've just got a warning on that. Let's see if we can change the video resolution. No, that's okay. That's all right. Well, hopefully this will still be okay. So in the meta level, there are 3 things: context, purpose, and meaning. It asks you to look at the elements of your piece of content, or whatever your content material is, at a big picture level. What is the context of use for this? Think about it. If it's a blog, maybe it's going to be read on a train. If it's a set of instructions, maybe it will be used in a wet area. If you're on an oil rig, there's a whole lot of other things you need to think about as for the context of use that can introduce complexities over which you have no control. It's important to spend a little bit of time thinking about that, because what you need to do is understand what actions you can take that will make the context not matter so much. So a really good example is perhaps in creating video content, you put closed captions on it because you understand that the context of use is a mother feeding her child at 2 a.m. And that she will probably want to watch a video with the sound off on a smartphone because that's the simplest thing for her, and maybe that's your way of creating simplicity for her. The second thing is purpose. For what reason are you creating it, and for what reason are people using it? And that's a very important thing too, because it enables you to get to the point. If you are creating a webinar for the purposes of distribution in schools, then you probably wouldn't use YouTube because the quality is maybe worse than it could be. If you're creating a blog for a law firm, then the purpose of that is probably education. It's probably not to describe how legislation works before law students. Okay, so understand the purpose. That's going to help you. The third thing is meaning. What meaning? What are you trying to convey to people? What meaning do you want them to take away? Write down what that is. It's going to help you because it's going to focus the direction for the piece of work that you are creating, and that's something that's very important to know before you start. Otherwise, you can invest a lot of time in creating something that's going to miss the mark. So there's your meta. Understand the context, know the purpose of creation, purpose of use, know what you want to convey, and then create the piece of content around that. The second thing is the macro level. At the macro level, I'll go back to the previous slide. At the macro level, what we want to do is organise it. So we've gone from the big picture structure, I guess, to the macro level, which is more about the physical nature of the work itself. So we're looking actually in the work. Organise it. What does the structure look like? Do you have headings? Are all of the parts in the right order for the reader's intention or for the consumer's intention and purpose? Make sure that the organisation matches as much as you can, because then you are reducing barriers to use. The second thing is to make it faster to use or to read. This means introducing white space, or rather reducing significant chunks of blocks of text that are impenetrable to look at, let alone to read. It means breaking text up with images and headings and block quotes and tweet me quotes and all sorts of other bits and pieces. It means maybe creating a faster to digest, shorter piece that's maybe a series. It means that if you are putting it on a website, that it's one of those terrible websites that makes you read 2 lines and look at a picture and then click through 50 pages to get to the rest. It means maybe you use a really fast script so that it doesn't keep loading, or that you allow people to consume it all at once. So maybe there's a link to the whole lot. Whatever it is, make it faster to use, faster to read, because that gives people their time back. When you give people their time back, things feel easier. That's the case in all things. It doesn't matter what it is. And if you think about your last stint on a phone line trying to talk to someone in a call centre, you will also understand this at a very personal level. If it's faster, it feels simpler. It's just the way it is. The third one is teach, if you have to. If you are presenting highly complex material or difficult words or industry-specific terms or anything like that, services people don't understand, products people don't understand, then teach them. Define the terms, take your time, provide a definition. If you have to include a reference dictionary, do that. When people learn, then whatever they're reading becomes simpler, which sounds kind of stupid because it should be obvious as, but the reality is if people understand more, then it doesn't matter what you present to them, it's going to be a lot easier for them to understand. And then we come right down to the micro level. This is at the fiddly level. We're going to think about all of the little parts of tweaking of language and elements that enable people to feel like things are simpler. The first one is to reduce. When editing occurs by non-editors, a very significant tendency that people have is to add things. Well, don't add things up front, take them away. Take the perspective that you can only ever remove things. And that's quite an important thing to think about. So reduce. Reduce complexity, reduce the number of words, reduce the number of elements in a sentence, reduce the number of phrases in a sentence, reduce the amount of jargon in a piece. Reduce, reduce, reduce. The second thing is to introduce variation. When we talk about blocks of text, variation includes things like pull quotes, photographs or graphs or maps or images or diagrams or tables. Variation also exists in bullet points and lists. Variation occurs in all kinds of visual and design ways. Introduces different types of headings, that sort of thing. Introduce variation. Don't bore people. That's really the key thing. As soon as you feel like you're not engaged anymore, that's the point at which you need to do something different. The third one is to appeal to warm emotions. Make people laugh. When people teach presentation skills, getting people on board with a giggle is one of the key ones. Appeal to warm emotions. Giggling makes us feel good, makes us want to be happy. It makes us feel happy, rather. So make them feel good. Make them feel good about themselves. Give them something that they can address really early on that is easy and simple. That inspire them in all sorts of different ways. There's ways you can do that in the text, but there are also little ways that you can do that places that produce a lot of content have been doing for a while now, and one of them is telling people how long it's going to take them to read it. That allows them to say, yes, I do have time, and that itself is a warm feeling. The fourth one is to inspire trust. When it comes to written content particularly, this is a very important thing, particularly in the professions, because we want people to trust us. And trust comes from things like data, market data, as opposed to product or personal data. It comes from links, linking out to other places. It comes from presenting case studies. It comes from the consistency of publishing. It comes from the how well you deal with comments and commentary afterwards as well. Inspire trust in people. Establish yourself as an authority. Sometimes that can also happen simply by the nature of the publication. If you publish an article in the Sydney Morning Herald or in the Australian Financial Review or in the New York Times, that instantly inspires trust because they are very well known, very highly regarded publications. And that's something that allows people to feel like they can trust you because these people think that you are good enough too. So take that contextual trust when you can. The fifth one is to accept that some things can't be simplified. If you are presenting mathematical formula for engineering, you can't simplify that and still demonstrate some research. It's just not possible. The complexity is there for a reason, and the audience understands that. But failure is right at the bottom of the pyramid. So if you have worked through all of the previous items and then you have come down to the bottom and you still haven't been able to do it, that's the point at which you accept failure. You can't, or you can, this is you, right? Like you can do this on your own, that's fine. You can accept failure at any point, but I suggest that you've done yourself a disservice. Don't think that you can't simplify anything any further until you have worked through all of the previous steps, because failure comes last, once everything else is exhausted. Then we come down to the one rule that rules them all. Remember this one, if nothing else. The one rule is subtract the obvious, add the meaningful. What this means is, if it's obvious to you, it's probably not obvious to your reader. That is particularly the case if you're in a highly, don't want to say educated, but a specific industry. Everybody wears shoes, so maybe, that's not a good example. But if something in about court processes, for example, let's just take that as an example, is obvious to you because you've been in law for 20 years, I suggest that's something that you should remove if there is an assumption that people understand that, because most people wouldn't understand that. Instead, add what is meaningful. The question then becomes, meaningful to whom? And the answer is to your audience. Make sure it's meaningful to them, and because they are the people who count, it's not you. So if you fail in all other ways to remember any of this framework, remember this one: subtract what is obvious to you, add what is meaningful to your audience. There is a link here that you can go to for further reading. It is brutalpixie.com/10-steps-simplicity, and that gives you the detailed written guide to this framework. And then, if after all of that you feel like that's way too much help, too much work, and you need some help, give us a call. Book a strategic consultation by sending an email, say hello@brutalpixie.com. You can call us or SMS us or Skype us on any of those numbers there. We work with anyone in the Asia Pacific region, so please do reach out and find out how we can help you with your projects. And that is the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was much quicker than our previous events at just half an hour. So let me know what you think about that. We haven't had any comments or questions in this session, which is good or bad. I'm not sure yet. So if you do have any questions, send us an email, and I will see you in the next webinar. Enjoy your day. Bye.